The last tram down from the mountain station runs at 9:45 in the evening. On July 14th, 2022, 4 women started climbing toward it. 3 of them never made it. This is not a story about bad luck. It is a story about a series of decisions that each seemed reasonable in the moment, and about how reasonable decisions, stacked in the wrong order, can become a death sentence on a mountain that has no mercy and no water. The Skyline Trail in Palm Springs, California, is one of the most brutal day hikes in North America. It does not advertise itself as dangerous. It does not need to. The math does that work quietly, patiently, while you are still in the parking lot. You gain 8,000 vertical feet in roughly 10 miles, climbing from the desert floor behind the Palm Springs Art Museum all the way to the San Jacinto Mountains, from cactus and sand to pine forest and snow, sometimes in a single morning. The locals call it Cactus to Clouds, and that name sounds beautiful until you understand what it actually means. You begin in a furnace and you climb into the sky on exposed granite with no shade, no water sources, and no way out except up. That last part is the trap, and it is the first open question this story raises. If the trail is so dangerous, why do people keep attempting it alone, without guides, without rescue plans? The answer is more unsettling than you would expect, and it starts with a woman named Dana Kessler. Dana was 47, an ultra-marathon coach from Palm Desert who had completed the Cactus to Clouds route twice before. She was the kind of person who knew the mountain, or believed she did, which on a trail like this amounts to the same thing until it doesn't. She organized the July 14th hike. She chose the group. She vouched for the pace. The 3 women she brought with her trusted her completely. Lourdes Okafor, 51, was a respiratory therapist from Riverside. She was the cautious one, the one who read trail advisories the night before, who packed an extra liter of water, who asked questions the others had stopped asking. She was also the one whose concerns would be overruled at the worst possible moment. Bev Stanton, 49, was 11 months out from a full knee replacement and had been training for this hike for months. She needed to prove something, to herself mostly, the way people do after their bodies have betrayed them. She was the slowest of the 4, and she knew it, and she told herself it didn't matter. Camille Royce, 44, was a landscape painter from Idlewild who saw everything through the lens of light and color. She was quiet on the trail, always pausing to photograph the way the early sun caught the granite, always drifting slightly behind the others. In the lower switchbacks, that habit looked charming. Higher up, it would become something else entirely. The trail demands a 3 a.m. start, not as a suggestion, as a survival requirement. The desert floor in July reaches 115 degrees Fahrenheit before noon. The exposed granite of the lower switchbacks radiates heat like a stovetop. Every hour of delay is an hour you spend on that wall in progressively worse conditions. The mountain's geometry punishes the late. Dana's group signed the trailhead register and stepped off at 6:10 a.m. Already late, the sun already cresting the ridge to the east, already beginning its work on the rock. Dana told them the pace was fine. She said they'd be on the tram by early afternoon, easy. She had done this before. And the thing about Dana's confidence is that it wasn't arrogance exactly, it was experience, translated incorrectly. She had completed this trail twice in cooler conditions with earlier starts. She was mapping her past onto a different day, a different group, a different body. That translation error would cost everything. The first 2 hours are deceptive. You're moving in the relative cool of early morning, the desert floor still visible below, the scale of the climb not yet apparent. The trail is steep, but the air is breathable, and there's something intoxicating about the view. The city of Palm Springs laid out like a circuit board. The mountains on the far side of the valley still purple in the early light. Camille stopped 4 times to photograph it. Dana let her. There was time, she said, there wasn't. By 9 a.m., the lower switchbacks were a griddle. The 4 women were climbing through heat that pressed down from above and radiated up from the rock. Bev's knee had begun to speak to her in a language she recognized, not sharp pain, but a deep, grinding complaint that said the joint was working harder than it should. She said nothing. She kept climbing. The rescue box sits at roughly the halfway point of the trail's vertical gain. It's a metal container bolted to the rock face, stocked with emergency supplies, a radio, a first aid kit, a logbook. It is also the last point where rescue teams can reach you with any efficiency. Above the box, the terrain fractures into switchbacks and false ridge lines that make helicopter approaches complicated and ground rescues brutally slow. The rescue box is not a rest stop. It is a decision point, the last honest one you'll get. The 4 women reached it at 11 a.m., hours behind any safe schedule. The rock around them was roasting. The sky was a flat, merciless white. Lourdes pulled up the National Weather Service advisory on her phone. She still had a faint signal here, the last she'd have for hours. Heat advisory, in effect. Extreme danger. The advisory used the phrase life-threatening heat. She read it aloud. Then she said what it implied. They should call for help now while they were still findable, while the radio in the box still worked, while there was still a version of this story that ended with all 4 of them going home. Dana overruled her in under a minute. And here is where the story becomes genuinely tragic, because Dana wasn't entirely wrong. She pointed out what the trail's geometry had already established. Going back down the exposed wall in afternoon heat with Bev's knee compromised and all of them partially depleted was its own kind of death sentence. The only efficient exit was up to the tram station, to shade, to water, to a gondola that would carry them safely down. The trap had already closed. The only way out was through. So they climbed into the worst of it. Past the rescue box, the switchbacks tighten, the exposure increases. The pines that promise shade are visible above, tantalizingly close. But on this mountain, close is a lie. Those trees are still an hour away, maybe 2, and the air between you and them is a wall of heat you have to walk through. Bev's pace collapsed first. The knee and the heat and the empty second water bottle arrived at the same moment on the upper switchbacks, and her body simply stopped being able to do what she was asking of it. But here's what made this worse. No one had been assigned to watch Bev. No one had been assigned to watch Camille. The group had no protocol, no designated sweep, no check-in intervals, no plan for what happened when the slowest member fell behind. These are the things a guide provides, not just knowledge of the route, but structure. A system that functions even when individuals stop functioning. The group fractured in 3 directions. Dana pushed on alone toward the tram station. She understood correctly that reaching the mountain station was the only way to get a signal out and call for rescue. She climbed with that purpose, leaving the others behind, which was both the right decision and the decision that left 3 women alone on a mountain with no radio and no plan. Lourdes stayed with Bev. She found a boulder that cast a narrow shadow, settled Bev into it, soaked her own shirt with the last water she had, and pressed it against Bev's neck and wrists. She had been a respiratory therapist for 23 years. She knew exactly what was happening to Bev's body. She knew exactly what she needed and didn't have. And she stayed anyway, the cautious one, the one who read the warning aloud, the one who said turn back. She stayed and refused to leave. What does that tell you about Lourdes Okafor? Camille's path is the one that haunts this story most. Somewhere on the upper trail, in the heat and the confusion that comes when your core temperature climbs past 104 degrees and your brain begins to misfire, Camille left the trail. She stepped off the marked path and began descending a dry drainage, a rocky gully that fell away from the mountain toward the desert floor. In her mind, apparently, this was a shortcut. The desert was visible from here, spread out below, and the drainage ran toward it like a road. It was not a road. It was a slot in the rock that ended in a dry fall, a dead end, a place the trail never entered and rescue teams rarely searched. No one saw her turn. At some point, the exact time is unclear, Dana Kessler reached the mountain station. She found a signal. She made the call. The 911 recording from that call is the spine of the reconstruction that came afterward. Dana's voice is the voice of someone whose body has been through something catastrophic and is still trying to function. She gives landmarks. Some of them are wrong. She describes where she left the others. Some of those descriptions don't match where they were found. Her voice keeps losing the thread, starting a sentence, stopping, starting again. The dispatcher asks her to stay on the line. She tries. A trail runner who had passed all 4 women low on the switchbacks that morning was interviewed by Riverside County Search and Rescue afterward. He remembered Dana joking when he passed them around 8 a.m. that the heat was character building. He said she seemed confident, experienced, in control. He said he hadn't thought to say anything because she seemed like she knew what she was doing. She did know what she was doing. That's the part that makes this so hard to sit with. The SAR helicopter reached the boulder where Lords had sheltered with Bev. The medic described what he found in a report that is clinical in its language and devastating in its implications. Lords had done everything right. She had positioned Bev correctly, managed her airway, used every drop of remaining water on cooling. She had stayed. She had not panicked. She had done what a respiratory therapist does, which is fight for someone's breathing until there is nothing left to fight with. It wasn't enough. The mountain had already decided. The search for Camille took longer. She was found a mile down the side drainage, a mile below the trail, a mile off any mapped route, at the bottom of the shortcut to nowhere. The drainage ended at a 10-foot dry fall onto bare rock. The investigators' best reconstruction is that she reached the edge in a state of severe heat-induced confusion and either fell or sat down and did not get up. The desert floor she had been walking toward was still miles away. She never knew she wasn't going to reach it. Now here's what I want you to sit with. Camille was not reckless. She was not inexperienced in the outdoors. What happened to her was hyperthermia, a physiological state in which the brain loses the ability to make accurate assessments of reality. The shortcut that killed her felt to her neurons like the right call. Her body was trying to save her life with a brain that had already been compromised by the thing it was trying to escape. This is the thing about heat stroke that most people don't understand. It doesn't feel like dying. It feels like clarity. It feels like suddenly seeing the obvious solution that everyone else has missed. The drainage runs down. Down is toward the desert. The desert is safety. The logic is perfect and the logic is lethal. What's your own experience with heat on a trail? Have you ever felt that strange false clarity where everything seems suddenly simple? Drop it in the comments. I'm genuinely curious how many people have felt that and recognized it for what it was. The Riverside County Coroner's Office issued its rulings in the weeks that followed. Bev Stanton, heat stroke, found on the upper switchbacks. Camille Royce, heat stroke, found at the bottom of the drainage a mile from the trail. Lords Okafor, heat stroke, found beside Bev under the boulder, the shirt still in her hands. 3 rulings, 3 women, 1 trail, 1 decision point where the story could have gone differently. Dana Kessler survived. She was airlifted from the mountain station in a state of severe heat stroke and spent 4 days in the ICU at Desert Regional Medical Center. She recovered physically. The neurological damage was more specific. Physicians described anterograde memory impairment, hippocampal in origin, the kind that leaves the past intact but makes the present slippery. Dana can describe the climb in precise detail. She can tell you exactly what the mountain looked like at every stage of the ascent. What she cannot reliably hold on to is the rescue, the call, what happened after she reached the station. Those hours exist for her only as a reconstruction, a story told to her by the people who pulled her off the mountain, by the dispatcher who stayed on the line, by the SAR teams who filed their reports. She has heard the account so many times that she knows it, but she doesn't remember it. There is a difference, and she is acutely aware of it. The one who reached the tram, the only one who got the signal out, the only one who can no longer be certain what happened next. Think about what this story is actually about. It isn't about the Skyline Trail specifically, though the Skyline is a particular kind of unforgiving. It's about the gap between experience and wisdom, the way past success can become a liability when conditions change. Dana had done this trail twice. That knowledge didn't protect her group. In some ways, it made things worse, because it gave her the confidence to overrule the one voice that was reading the situation correctly. Lords read the advisory aloud. She said the words. She named the danger. She was overruled by someone with more trail miles and less situational awareness in that specific moment. This happens on mountains, it happens in hospitals, it happens in boardrooms. The person with the most experience isn't always the person with the clearest view of what's actually happening right now. Here's a question worth sitting with. Have you ever been in a situation where you knew something was wrong, said so, and were overruled by someone with more authority or experience? What did you do? What do you wish you'd done? Leave that in the comments, because that dynamic, that moment where the cautious voice gets silenced, is at the center of almost every preventable disaster I've ever researched. The Skyline Trail is still open. Riverside County Search and Rescue responds to distress calls on it multiple times every summer. The trailhead register still shows signatures from people who sign in at 7, 8, 9 in the morning in July. The rescue box is still there at the halfway point. The radio inside it still works. The logbook still has blank pages. What would it take for someone standing at that box in the heat of late morning to make a different choice than Dana made? Not more courage. It takes courage to keep climbing. Not more experience. Dana had that. It would take the willingness to let the cautious voice win. To treat the warning as information rather than obstacle. To understand that the trail's geometry, the heat advisory, the empty water bottles, and the slowing pace are not problems to be solved by determination. They are the mountain telling you something true. One more question, and this one is personal. If you had been in that group standing at the rescue box at 11 a.m. with Lords reading that advisory aloud, what do you think you would have done? I'm not asking rhetorically. I think most of us, if we're honest, have more Dana in us than we'd like to admit. The confidence that past experience earns, the belief that we can push through, the quiet certainty that the cautious voice is being overcautious. Leave your honest answer in the comments. It matters. Interview. Dana Kessler gave one recorded interview about 8 months after the rescue. She was asked what she would do differently. She said she would have started at 3 a.m. She said she would have listened to Lords at the box. Then she paused, the kind of pause that has weight in it, and said she wasn't sure those changes would have been enough. She said the trail doesn't negotiate. She said that's the thing she keeps trying to remember and keeps losing. 4 women signed the Trailhead Register at 6:10 a.m. on a July morning when the heat advisory was already in effect, when the sun was already cresting the ridge, when the mountain was already becoming what it becomes every summer afternoon, an oven with a view. They trusted each other and trusted their experience and trusted that the only way out was up. One of them still carries that morning in her body, in the specific shape of what she can and cannot hold on to. The other 3 are in the coroner's records, in the SAR reports, in the blank pages of the rescue box logbook that still waits at the halfway point for someone to open it and make a different choice. The last tram down runs at 9:45. The trail is still there, and the mountain, as always, is not waiting.